Now we're going to talk about the Premier League weekend. As ever, our football show coverage is with thanks to Sky Sports, where you can experience more exclusive live sport than anywhere else on Sky Sports and the Sports Extra Pack. You'll have access to every live Premier League match this season. So on Saturday, Leeds Spurs on TNT is the lunchtime kickoff, and then later that day, Liverpool are at Stamford Bridge next weekend, live on Sky Sports. You can get Sky Sports and Sports Extra on Sky, or you can stream them with Now. And a pretty interesting weekend. It started in fine fashion, an Irish flavour to proceedings as Brentford did Manchester United comprehensively in the end. And then it finished up with a 97th minute winner for Gabriel at St James's Park to push Arsenal to within 2 points of Liverpool. On a weekend, a lot of people thought Liverpool might somehow extend their lead to 8 points. But Arsenal rallied and Liverpool lost at Palace on the Saturday. So we have lots to talk about. Happy to say Gary Breen is with us. Welcome, Gary.
Hey, Joe. Thanks, mate.
Let's start then with Manchester United, who have decided to go full-blown crisis. There was something about Brentford away. I thought if Keith Andrews needs a game to nurse his way back into, winning mode, confidence, Manchester United at home, lunchtime kickoff on TV. There was something kind of predictable about this almost.
Oh, there absolutely was in terms of how Brentford went about getting at United, and so how predictable United faced up to the challenge. We just saw, if you could have written a script on how that game would go, it's pretty much how it actually did go. And that just shows you, we talk about these coaches and these analysts knowing the intricacies of the game and find the fine margins. We knew straight away, play balls in behind that back three, that back five of United, and you'll get joy. And Brentford did just that and got their rewards. And it's just incredible watching Manchester United now, because you're looking at the situation thinking, how long can this continue? Because there's no attempt to try and change it in terms of trying to adapt to the Premier League, this system that is failing, and it will continue to fail. Even if they were to get in every player that he wanted, I still think that system's vulnerable in the way that United would look to adopt it. It may work for teams down the bottom part of the Premier League, but it's not going to work for a club of United's iconic status. And it just looks like it's going from bad to worse. We were led to believe that if he could get this team on the training field and coach him, he could show his qualities. If he was afforded time to do that by the fact not having any European football, being out of the League Cup relatively early, so he could go weekend to weekend with the games, get the work done. We talked about the money spent, a huge amount of investment in the team on proven players in the Premier League, so it wasn't a case of having to bed them in. We heard that the pre-season went so well, but as soon as the games start in the Premier League, the same old failings emerge for United, and it just doesn't look like they're ever going to be corrected.
It was striking, I think, the body language. It just looks like there's a sense, I think, on his part that this is over, and even at one stage he was caught by the cameras, just not even watching the match anymore, just looking down at the ground. And he was asked about that afterwards, and he said, no, look, I'm just thinking. I'm just looking down. I'm thinking. It's normal. All managers do it. It didn't feel normal. It looked defeated. It just, I mean, you can think and watch the match. He just looked like he was like slumped.
Yeah, listen, body experts in terms of what people are doing. But you're right. It's just such a bad optic, isn't it, in terms of looking down to the ground. He's not affecting the game. He's not getting up. And I think the very fact that he keeps saying this, and I won't quit, and if you want to change the manager, I've got no problem with it. It just looks like it's inevitable that it's going to happen. Now we're hearing about talk that the hierarchy at United are looking at alternatives who may well be out there. I know Southgate has those links to Ineos and having worked or been around them as manager as England. So that's not something that kind of grabs the attention of United fans. And then you have the lazy kind of stereotypes of saying like, oh, Glasner plays that system, so Matt, perhaps he can come in and adopt it better. And you're thinking, I covered Palace against Liverpool at the weekend, and we'll go into more depth about that. But he does play that system, but he plays it with players who have got physical attributes, mental strength, which these United players just don't do. They just don't have the capability of playing this system. And that's why you can't help from an outsider looking in and think, well, if you're going to put huge investment into two proven number 10s and Bruno and Cunha coming into the club, where are you going to play Bruno? If you're not going to play him at 10, we know he can't play in deep midfield. So, are they now looking to think about moving Bruno on and getting a massive fee for him and then identifying where the main problem is not having that physicality in deep midfield? But it just, none of the thinking and watching him, it makes any sense whatsoever. You think about You're playing against Brentford. You're going to play a relatively high line and two basic balls over the top. Even though you've got De Ligt and you've got Maguire, they just can't defend them. And you're thinking, this is just something we've seen before and we're continuing to see.
Yeah.
Incredible. It's just this, Joe, we literally could do this every fortnight on United. And we might as well just record it from today and then play it in 2 weeks' time because it'll be the same problems again.
Yeah. That Bruno problem, it's funny you mentioned that because when
Yeah.
Amram was first signed, one of the first things a lot of people said was, "Oh, I don't see Bruno fitting in here." And, you know, maybe it's in part why Dan Ashworth said, "Oh, to hell with this. If this is how you guys are running this place, like that
Yeah.
is such a basic but core problem, one of many." I mean, I'm sure he's a great coach, and obviously, he may well go on to have a great career. But I do really feel it's been insanity that he has been just allowed to continually give this line about, well, this is my system and I stick to it and I don't change for anybody and I'll never change and I'll
Yeah.
never adapt. And like that just never struck me as management. Like, and I've said this about half a dozen times. I'm sick of hearing myself say it. Any of us could just learn off one system and say, well, that's my philosophy and just keep implementing it over and over again. Like, he can't be just let get away with this. It's done. If he's just going to keep doing this, it's done.
The incredible thing is that you say, this is my one system. And ultimately, what you're saying to your opposition is, I'm never going to change how I can play. So just do all the work you want and in terms of exposing it. We haven't even got the players to play this system. So it's not even a case of that it can succeed. And you're looking at scenarios and thinking, managers have got to be able to have that in-game management to assess what's happening because the Premier League is quite varied. It's not like the Portuguese league or the Dutch league where everyone kind of plays the same way and the best teams will just come through because they have the better players. You're always being challenged for different reasons. And that's why it's so competitive, the Premier League. That's why we love it. That's why it's so difficult. But you're looking at him and you're right. You're thinking 34 points from 33 Premier League games for Manchester United on the back of all that investment. Now, immediately people say, well, listen, it's the players. And it is to a certain extent. But as a manager, surely the most basic remit of your job is to get the best out of the players you have available to you. And I'm looking at that scenario. There'll be so many United fans, there's no doubt in this, they'll think that squad, as bad as it has been, is still capable of being further up the table than 14th if they played in a system which would actually play to their strengths with the players that they've got. And yet, no, he's steadfast, he will not do it. And you're looking at the scenario and you're just thinking, this can only go one way. There's no other outcome in terms of this United team under this manager, unfortunately, will not be successful.
So the tricky part for them now is, when do we pull the plug on this? Who do we have lined up? And the optics of all that, because they're going to get it in the neck if you make a mess of one decision, then it's the manager's fault. But if you're continually picking the wrong manager, then it's your fault. Where you would have sympathy for Amram for sure. You mentioned the goals, the nature of the goals. Like the first one, that long ball up and Maguire tries to step out against Thiago. And then the second one is just like a nothing long ball.
Yeah,
It's De Ligt. De Ligt's been good this season, actually.
but it's in the middle, Joe. In the middle, he's been very good. But you push him out onto that right hand side, and now suddenly you're a bit. If you're a big cumbersome centre back, you don't really want to be on those wide right positions. That's why Euro does particularly well because although he's very young, got a lot to learn. He's got that recovery pace. He's comfortable in wide positions. But De Ligt on a basic ball just gets spun round, just panics and loses it. Maguire, of course, recognises that he's in a 1v1, panics, tries to step up. I mean, the finish is sensational. But you're looking at those scenarios and you're just thinking it's just so easy to play against this Manchester United team. And this is the concern for them, is that they've got these players, and these are players who have consistently not hit the kind of high level you associate with Manchester United, regardless of their fees in terms of how much they cost, whatever money they're on, their wages. They're just nowhere near it, whether or not, you must be a talented player to play for Manchester United, but you've got to be a very good one to stay there. That was always the remit we always remembered playing against United teams, is that top players, you think about Varane, those type of guys coming in at Man United, and everyone's saying, oh, he's an amazing footballer, but he couldn't cope. He just couldn't cope at United. He couldn't cope at Chelsea. And these players just can't cope. It's just incredible. And now you're going to look at scenarios where they're now even entertaining re-signing Maguire on a new contract because it's been run down, and you're thinking you're just going back to the old problems to solve the new problems. It's just a merry-go-round of just poorness, really.
Yeah. As a former centre half, this business, which has been talked about a lot, but Nobody sees much logic in the way he continually substitutes his
Oh, I just don't
back
understand it.
three and like you moved there and you moved like where you want stability. Presumably is what everyone assumes. There must be a logic. What do you suspect it is?
Do you know what? I just don't see the logic on it because, especially when I think about centre back, it's a tough position to play. Of course it is, but it's not as physically demanding in terms of the yardage you cover. So you shouldn't be out of fitness. If it was a case of early on in the season and you're kind of like, initially when it happened, I thought, oh, he's just building up players' fitnesses. But now it's a tactical decision, and I just don't understand it. I don't see what the benefit of it is. At times, the only way I could see any benefit when it was happening initially was that Maguire was coming off the bench because they had to chase an equaliser or something like that, and his physicality, which he proved in Europe a couple of times, that he actually could be a goal threat. But in terms of consistently doing it, it just looks a mess. And I just, you just don't know what you're looking at. Those first two goals are dreadful, and then you've got a goalkeeper who's actually playing well and makes a couple of good saves. And then for the third goal, when you're chasing it, it's a strike from distance. It just goes through him. I don't even know how he's dived. It's actually right into his hands if he's just stood up, and yet he dives and it goes over him. It's just, I mean, from a manager's point of view, key moments in games, of course it is. Nathan Collins should have been sent off. That's a red card. It's a nonsense in terms of VAR coming in saying that Mbeumo's not in control of the ball. Well, he's never going to control it. He's just going to have a first-time strike on goal and score.
Mm.
And now they deem that the wording of that is just another example of, as much as United are failing, how often VAR fails.
Yeah. Yeah, the goalkeeping mistake was like cherry on top in terms of just dismantling all
And
confidence.
he actually made some good saves in the game as well. But it's that consistency again. It's not about moments. It's about your consistency levels at Manchester United. And when you think about the great teams, that's what they were, consistently good.
If you had to guess, how long is this going to go on for, do you think?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of this has been said about whether or not it's a financial decision, and does he have to get to November to have been a year in charge? If he gets sacked before, he's entitled to his full payout or something like that. So I'm sure the businessmen at United will make that decision because money is tight. But if that's going to be like a slow death, isn't it?
Yeah. So for Brentford, beautiful. It was funny at our roadshow we did with yourself and Damien and Tony Adams. Everyone was kind of backstage at that stage chatting away, and it was about 20-25 minutes in when suddenly you realised you hadn't chatted to Damien about Keith Andrews, and you just went, Jesus, Keith!
Yeah.
You know? So we're all looking on with interest. This off the back of a 3-1 defeat to Fulham. They'd had a good result against Chelsea the week before, 2-2, and came through against Villa in the League Cup. But this is just a lovely settler down for him.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's a massive win. Bearing in mind it's United coming to town as Brentford, although they're established in the Premier League, it's still like the biggest show in town when United roll in. And for him, and you're right, in terms of Keith, like we're looking on it and we're proud. We want like an Irish manager in the Premier League. It's fantastic. I'm certainly hope he does brilliantly. But in terms of the reaction, is because your reaction initially that Keith gets the job is you're thinking Premier League job, your first job. It's incredible, really. But it didn't really surprise me that much about Keith because he kind of like throughout his career after football, he has moved into certain avenues around football that does surprise you. Like he was the lead kind of pundit for Sky, and you're thinking that's a great gig to get. Then he gets the assistant manager's job with Stephen Kenny. You're thinking, oh, I didn't even know he knew him, and suddenly he gets that. And then he gets in at Brentford. I thought, well, what's the connection there? But he's got in there, and then suddenly he's the manager. He's just one of those guys. We've actually even seen him present in sports shows. He's that type of guy as well. So it's incredible how he does it. But this is a great opportunity. And we have said before, it's probably only Brighton or Brentford where he would have got that opportunity. And they've recognised it, Brentford. They've made decisions before in terms of not going down the usual managerial route and in terms of identifying someone who can come in and impact. And they've obviously done that with Keith. So it's important that he did get some big wins early on, and he has. And he's looking like, and he looks comfortable in the role. So that's great. Long may it continue.
Caoimhin Kelleher obviously to the fore, saving the penalty, as he often tends to do. Nathan Collins' form has been talked about a lot, and there are other, more Republic of Ireland matches quickly coming into view. Aside from the penalty, he seemed to have an okay game. Like he won a lot of balls, which had been a criticism of yours in the Hungary game. I seem to remember he seemed to do okay.
Yeah, listen, this is the thing. This is why I can't really marry up the two, is that when he has played for Brentford, I know he's had a couple of different games recently, but before, so consistent, get the manager's vote as the captain, and has real presence there in the toughest league. So ultimately, then I'm thinking, all right, bring that type of composure, that form to Ireland, and he just hasn't, to our detriment, really. And you do then wonder whether or not the armband and how desperately he is to do well for Ireland is a bit too much too much of a burden to carry. I think a lot of those Irish players are desperate to do well. Maybe they just need to calm themselves down, have a little bit of a more cold, calculated kind of persona going into the Ireland games, because the emotion seems to be bringing out the worst in them as opposed to the best.
Yeah. And by the way, I hadn't seen too much of them. I think he played about 75 minutes. Obviously, he's been a little bit more economic in his movements, but you could see the nous of Jordan Henderson in that game, couldn't you? It's just
Yeah,
times he's in third gear, just little step here, little step there, just keeping things moving.
yeah, you can absolutely, and it probably why Keith identified getting him in terms of that experience, and as we said, like a lot of experience going out of the building at Brentford, making it difficult. Nathan as a young captain, maybe that kind of sounding board that Jordan comes in and helps out. But it's more than that. It's not just that, because I genuinely say this a lot. Experience is overrated. It so is, because if we're experienced, you'd be getting, you'd be pulling Roy Keane back to play for United now. It's not about that. It's how you actually influence the game. And Jordan Henderson still does. And those early balls probably suit him. You think about him playing on that right side for Liverpool. He used to do it so well, but he's done it brilliantly for Brentford. Early balls, releasing those quick forwards ahead of play to great effect. It's been a really good signing.
Yeah, he played the ball actually for the first goal. And sorry, I don't want to get back on Harry Maguire's case again. But so obviously Maguire's, afraid of his life of a sprint. He doesn't want that. But what's kind of disappointing was he didn't digest the fact that the Henderson pass, it was a big loopy pass. Like, it took forever to come down. It wasn't like it was fired through and this is a full out sprint with Michael Owen beside me. Like, even if Maguire had just trotted back, he would have caught the ball by the time it had bounced, Yeah,
it's the panic initially. He probably identifies that he's on his own and around about the halfway line. There's a lot of space in behind. But, I've said this to you before, Joe. I've played with slow centre-backs as my partners. Kenny Cunningham, very slow, no real pace. He won't like me saying it. But I never saw him getting beaten in behind for pace, because he read situations. He saw how the game was developing in front. Harry Maguire, in a way that Kenny would have done, you see what's happening in front of you. You feel you're a little bit vulnerable. If you are, you drop off a bit, make that centre forward come with you, then create the space to step up on him and play the offside. He didn't do any of that. He just got bogged down in a position. And the reason he steps up is because he's just gambling and he's hoping. He's literally going like that. I hope he's offside. There's no real control of the situation. If he did dropped off 3 or 4 yards, you're right. By the time the centre forward has controlled the ball, he's back to lean into him. It would have been no problem. It wouldn't necessarily have been kind of a 100-metre sprint. He'd have got back, but it just shows you that the confidence they're playing with at the moment is not really there.
Yeah. So at the top of the table, there was some talk at the start of the weekend that Liverpool would keep the show on the road, and Arsenal often find it difficult at St James's Park. This could be out to 8 points. We could be looking at a repeat of last season. So for the neutral, it's brilliant that it's back to 2. You were in commentary for Premier Sports for Crystal Palace, Liverpool. It was such a brilliant game. And obviously Chiesa with the equaliser in the 87th minute, we thought, well, that's the script, and if anyone's going to score next, it'll be Liverpool, and then Eddie and Nketiah. Little Eddie, as I see, the first person.
Little Eddie,
at Arsenal. You were the first person told me about Little Eddie. Lot of composure. Did not rush his opportunity, and scores in the 97th minute to make it a 2-1 win for Palace. Arne Slot, Palace fully deserved the win.
Yeah.
To start with the first half first, because you could look at the highlights and you could see that Palace had 29% possession and their goal comes from a scrappy kind of corner, and you could think they kind of did a bit of a smash and grab here. It was all out assault in Liverpool first half.
Joe, it's no exaggeration to say that Palace really should have been 4-0 up at half time. They had that low block and we're talking about this system and it's compared to the way Amorim plays it. And this is my one caveat in terms of whether or not Glasner could go in at United, is that Palace as the home team sit deep on the edge of their own box. They invite you on, and the distances between the units, the trigger points where they release, it's all done so efficiently. It's actually brilliant to watch. You wouldn't watch match of the day for it as such, but if you are a defensive any interest in it, you see it, because that back five, as soon as the ball goes down one side, the wing back goes out, puts pressure on their wing or their full back, and the left side or the right side centre back just goes into full back, and it's just done so effortlessly. Then as the Liverpool get frustrated, they can't pass forward, they couldn't pass centrally, so they keep passing side to side, and then Palace were just like pistons. Every time the ball moved, that guy came out, that guy shuffled round. perfection. It was so good to watch. It was brilliant. But from that platform then, the pace with which they counter-attack was incredible. And the reason why they weren't 4-0 down is because they didn't finish their chances, but ultimately Alisson was inspired for me in goal. He was so good. And you looked at Liverpool and you just thought, oh my God, Slot, for as masterful as he was in terms of managing that squad he inherited last year to the title, he's got a massive job on his hands now because the shape of the team is all over the place. And you're looking at how they're playing. With the money that they signed, everyone was going, these are champions elect. I never felt that. And I never felt that even with the 5 wins out of 5, because I thought Liverpool so vulnerable. I see Arsenal way ahead of this Liverpool team in terms of where they are right now. I think Slot is a brilliant manager. I think he can get it right, but he's got some massive decisions to do because Florian Wirtz, he's trying to shoehorn him in at left wing on Saturday, and it just didn't work to the extent that he was drifting, trying to get involved because he wants to do well. And there are glimpses of it, but just not consistent enough. But by floating around from left wing and in centrally, the whole team is out of shape now. Straight away, what we have learned is in the Premier League, you can't carry one player, let alone 2. And Liverpool have Wirtz going where he wants and Salah just having a free roll, never coming back. So Palace just broke off that shape all the time. And the problem that you had is that as Wirtz is moving around, Gravenberch, with this new license to kind of go forward, does that. But then as soon as the turnovers is made, you just look at Liverpool and you think, you're going to get cut open here. And they continually did. Add into that, Joe, that the 2 fullbacks who have come in, Kerkez and Frimpong, just don't look anywhere near the level yet. I don't know whether it's early on. And Konate has just lost all sense of composure. He just looks like he's a nervous wreck on the ball and just has none of that physical presence that we normally associate with him. So it's only Van Dijk and Alisson who's keeping Liverpool in it at the moment, because last season, after 5 games, I think they'd only conceded 2 goals. Now I think they've conceded 8. And it could easily be another 4 or 5 on top of that. So real problems in terms of fitting it in. And the one thing as well, I know I'll keep going on here. The one thing that I'm fascinated about Liverpool is that Isak comes in as the top goal scorer in Europe, the top centre forward. But that's going to completely change the dynamic of Liverpool. Because if you think about Liverpool over the years, that centre forward has often been the facilitator, whether it's been Firmino, Jota, they drop into 10 so that the key man, Salah, is at the point of the attack. They're going to have to change that. You're not going to get the top class centre forward in Europe and ask him to start playing 10. So what's going to happen there? Is Salah going to adjust his game? We know he has to be the main man, otherwise he's not really interested. So it's a massive one there. I'm looking at that scenario and thinking, I know he signed his new contract, but I'm not sure if he'll even see the season out at Liverpool, Salah, because he's been nowhere near the levels.
Wow, so much in that. That's really interesting.
Sorry.
No, amazing. Take that first problem you mentioned, because it was very striking that Szoboszlai's been in very good form, so you have to play him. You can't keep playing him at right back. So listen, Wirtz, it's not really happening. Like he was a bit brighter against Atletico, people felt, but it's not really happening. So Szoboszlai in you go, especially for, physical game, Crystal Palace away from home. And so as you shunned Wirtz out into the left and you see what happens. And that doesn't really work for the reasons you mentioned. It's tough for a manager, big, expensive signing.
Yeah. To
drop him. You kind of want to try and nurse him into it with as much game time as possible. But that's a big bullet to have to bite.
Yeah, but I don't think he's got any fear of doing that, Slot. I think he's such a strong manager. I really like him. I've been so impressed with him in terms of how he conducts himself. And this is incredible because Liverpool's so good last year, yet this feels like a big rebuild in terms of how many players have actually left and how many have come in now. He did something similar at Feyenoord in his second season there, where a massive turnover of players, and he drove them on to their first title or only their second one this century. Incredible, but again, you've got to give it some context. That this is the Premier League. Like, this is not the Eredivisie. So I'm looking at it and I just think there are so many problems in terms of this huge recruitment coming in, because Gravenberch was sensational as that holding midfielder. But if he starts moving out of that midfield slot in terms of being more of a threat going forward, which he has been, he's got more goals this season than he ever has done. But it then does leave McAllister isolated, and he was nowhere near his influential best. He was like a yard off it. Yeah. And if you think about the best part of his game, it's certainly not running people down in space, because he's not. I don't think he's the most athletic type of midfielder, as good as he is. So there just seems that with every problem you're trying to solve in terms of shoehorning these players in, because Wirtz, I know for Leverkusen, he played in that left-hand side, but he was the main man in that left-hand side, continuously served ball. Whereas he's not getting it. He's not getting it all the time for Liverpool. So he's drifting. He's trying to influence it. This is going to be a real test of Slot's
Yeah.
managerial capabilities.
And do you think Wirtz will come good in the Premier League? I mean, very good.
I think he's a fantastic footballer, and we've seen glimpses of it where you think, "Oh God, that's unbelievable what he's just done there." But the one thing I would say, and we think about the German league as being quite a physical league, the Bundesliga, the Premier League's miles ahead in terms of physicality. And at the moment, the problem is that they're nowhere near it, Liverpool, in terms of where they need to be. And then the flip side is that as much as people criticise Arsenal and talk about the handbrake, they just look like they've got all the kind of they've got all their ducks in a row. Yeah. They just look like they're ready.
And I know you say it full in the knowledge that like Salah can make any talk of his demise look very foolish and could score for the next 10 games in a row. He could do it. But at the moment, you think physically he's fallen off as well?
I do. Listen, because of the high standing. If I think about Salah, like when he takes his top off, he's like incredible, his physique. But that's not what goes as a footballer. It's not aesthetically your body.
That's what you told the S&C staff, was it, back in the day? Don't mind this little Ned Kelly. That's not important. My little punch is fine.
Yeah, it's the gears. Are they still there? And they're not for Salah. Maybe it will come. I don't think it will do. I've seen it before. I remember Gordon Strachan saying to me as when your legs go, they go. He didn't say it to me, but there was a player in our squad. I won't name who he was. He was a massive player. He started the first game. No, as I tell you, it's Colin Hendry. We brought him in the big fanfare. Colin Hendry played in the first game of the season against Bocic. Never played him again. We were like, I thought this is a big sign. He was like, no, when your legs go, they go. And there's that famous saying, Bob Paisley, don't let a player's legs go on your pitch. Let them go on someone else's. And I don't know, I'm looking at Salah and I'm thinking, no fullback. He doesn't run past any fullback anymore. They're so happy. They were last year, even though his numbers were incredible. But I just saw fullbacks, go on. I don't need you to come back. I'm comfortable against him.
Yeah, because it's very interesting. Obviously, his numbers were so good last year.
Amazing.
The club almost had no option. And it took a long time, didn't it? Like longer than it should have. It dominated the whole season. Trent was a different case. Van Dijk was a different case. You just wonder if they were seeing something in the numbers that were giving them a pause. But then it just reached a point of like, there'll be a riot here. If we don't sign him, the fan, it'll just go crazy. They just had to. He kind of forced them into it. But maybe they saw something.
It's the DNA of your team, though, isn't it? In terms of if you want him to play that way, and he even intimated it in interviews after games. I don't have to come back as much now. Yeah, fair enough. We're organised it behind it.
Yeah,
like we said, you've got even Nunez was dropping deep to help out with his energy and stuff like that. But are you going to sign the top striker in Europe and say to him now, like, you're not going to be playing at the point? And have we maybe seen it before with Salah in terms of the problems he had with Mane, that he wouldn't pass to him and that he wants to be the top man? So now it's a difficult one because Salah, I mean, I couldn't speak highly enough of him. He is amazing. But when you are at these big clubs, and I immediately thought then Ferguson at United, not happy with Stam, he goes. Not happy with Roy, he goes. Van Nistelrooy, he goes. Ince, Beckham, they go. They just go. And they build the next lot. And it's the timing of when you do that. And it's Slot, you're right, because the optics would be very difficult on what was a record-breaking season to do it. But I think you have to recognise when it has to be done.
Yeah, because we had Jamie Delaney last season was calling it like early. He was like, they need to get rid of him. It's done. Trust me, it's done. He'll go off a cliff. And by January, February, even he was like, oh look, I guess you have to, but that doubt is still there. Come here on Konate, because like in some respects, again, if people didn't see the game in full, Konate was such a pivotal figure in that first half. Like 11 minutes in, he was last man back in possession, and he kind of almost stumbled over the ball, and Palace were in one-on-one. He got a yellow card very early on. It's a bit like watching Match of the Day highlights when they show a yellow card. It just felt like he is going to get sent off today. He didn't, but he was in that much kind of trouble. And Mateta, he was both physically bullying him, or else he was rolling him or running him behind. Like, I'd say Slot was looking over at Mark Gay dreamingly and thinking, maybe we do need to break the bank in January. But like, whatever's going on there with Konate, like, he was so bad it has to be fixable. Like in the short term, he's not that bad a player. He had a stinker.
Oh, he's a brilliant player in terms of when he's on top of his game. And I've always felt this, though, those kind of really big, heavyweight centre-backs, they always look like they need 6 or 7 games to really get the timing right and stuff. Otherwise, they can look cumbersome and stuff like that. But he just seems to have lost all part of his composure. It's just completely gone. You think about the goals at times where he's literally running backwards and he just falls over. It's incredible. And like when I first started out, I'll tell you this as a bit of a name drop, but when I first started coaching, I was with Darren Ferguson at Peterborough, and I was coaching the back four, and I was so happy with myself. We were getting clean sheets and stuff like that. I was full of it. And I went into the manager's office afterwards, and Sir Alex was in there, and it was just him. I walked in unbeknown to him, and he just said to me, like, it was no one else. He said, defence are doing well, yeah? I went, yeah, no, we're really happy. I was like, quite shy and stuff like that. And he went, your centre-backs have got no balance. And I was like, what? And he was like, nah, they're not, you've got to get centre-backs with balance. They keep falling over and stuff like that. And it really resonated with me because I think about, even like big centre-backs like Van Dijk, he's so effortless in terms of how he moves. He can turn his body beautifully and stuff like that in terms of running back. But then you think about other centre-backs having to do those lungy tackles, last-ditch things because they just don't have the balance. It's incredible. And I wonder whether or not when people are recruiting these defenders now, and you're right, Gay is exactly that. Never seems to be lunging tackles, never seems to be falling over, just calm, cool, collected. And I like Konate, and I think the fact that he will be on a free transfer will definitely get admiring glances from some of the biggest clubs in Europe. And there's not to talk about Real Madrid, but he's so far off of what he was last year right now. It's incredible.
God, that's an interesting story in Ferguson.
Yeah.
And you imagine the things he just, without using jargon or BS, just saw in players, like just proper good assessment of players. There's a great clip I saw of Rio Ferdinand talking about Ferguson, who he said never gave him advice. And, game to game, never told him how to go against a certain striker. The one time Ferdinand remembered was against Suarez. And when you hear Ferdinand say what Ferguson said to him, you can see it in your mind's eye and it's totally true and it's such a great spot. And so he said, like, listen, Rio, Suarez today, never make the first move with him. That's all he's looking for. He wants you to stick the foot in and then he'll sort of like ricochet it in with his shin. He just gets through you somehow. He had this way of doing it. Don't do it. Just stand. Make the first move, you're in trouble. Don't do it. And so Ferdinand, okay, and he took it on the pitch and never, just waited. Even when Suarez is shown on the ball, waited. And then Suarez would check back out and Rio's thinking to himself, bloody hell, this guy knows a lot,
Exactly. I mean, that's so we're kind of like, of course, he knows a lot of stuff, but not the intricacies of a position as such. And it's things like that because you think about that Aberdeen team with like Willie Miller and McLeish. They were unbelievable defenders in terms of taking on not only the old firm up there and winning against them, but the giants of Europe as well. And then even when he was manager of Scotland that time, he wasn't bringing the iconic centre-back at the time, Alan Hansen, into the squad. He was going, no, it's about blah, blah, blah. And all those decisions, and I think about those United defenders that he had, those centre-backs, and Stam was just like, wow, when he first comes to the Premier League, like, it's incredible. But even getting like Steve Bruce from Norwich, who would have played his career at Gillingham before that, and identifying them guys, a young Pallister from Middlesbrough who would have been quite gangly, but then the bedrock of the team going forward. But also kind of saying to Paul McGrath, well, listen, if you can't play every week, you're not staying here. It's amazing, isn't it, really, those type of little, those moments. But yeah, no surprise. But it's balance. I do look at centre-backs now when I've got my kind of coaching head on and stuff, and I just want to see people who are not... As a defender, ultimately, your job is to slow down the attack.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of defenders now lunge in, actually quicken up the attack. And I used to think about that Otamendi at City. I was looking at Pep thinking, you're never going to win with him at centre-back. And him and Stones that time, every time they play as a combination for City, their numbers were terrible. Yeah. And then he gets in a good centre-back, like, proper centre-backs in there, and it makes a big difference.
Well, we'll watch with interest. There's a lot there for Liverpool, obviously. So Arsenal, after huge criticism for the way he went about his business against Manchester City and to an extent at Anfield, St James's Park, away from home, Eze started, so it felt like a more attacking lineup, and then, he threw the kitchen sink a little bit towards the end, and they get their just desserts. So that feels like a very big day for Mikel Arteta against all the criticism that is thrown at him a lot lately.
Yeah, massive in terms of, people jump on the headline of the handbrakes on and stuff like that. Listen, he's not going to change Arteta. His philosophy and his mindset and how he sees the games going is to keep it defensively strong. To a certain extent, you look at him and think he's probably more David Moyes, having worked under him, than he is having worked under Wenger or even having worked under Pep Guardiola. He has that type of viewpoint in terms of the Premier League. And listen, as much as we said how well they played that first 30 minutes, they blitzed Newcastle. They couldn't live with them, Arsenal. But it was still, despite all that creativity supposedly being in the team with Eza, it was still the physicality that ends up winning them the game, with Mourinho coming on with a sensational header and then Gabriel as well for the winner. But there are moments, and you hear about people who have experienced this, like Gary Neville saying, there are moments where that feels like such a turning point for a team. Even in his commentary, he was saying, if they get one back, they've got to go on and win this. And invariably it played out that way. You think about United and those type of teams getting those late winners, or Man City, whatever. But you look at that and just thought, they look so strong. They just do. They've got so many options. And I don't think that Gyökeres coming in at number 9 was the type of player who's going to start every game. And there'll be questions asked of him now that he's played against Newcastle, City and Liverpool, played all 90 minutes, no goal. So there's a lot of kind of questions being asked for what actually is his level. Is he just a flat track bully who may well score against the lower teams, which they may well need? But I still think that Arsenal they've got the perfect squad. I genuinely believe that now, looking at them. I just think they're in such a good place. It will be about their mindset now more than anything. And those type of late wins that they got now should make a massive difference. The concern for me still remains, I think that squad's more than capable of winning the league. I'm not sure whether or not Arteta will get in the way of that. And what I mean by that is that he can, despite having that depth, overuse players. I mean, why is Saliba playing for 90 minutes against Port Vale in the week? So, which then means he has to be sub on the Premier League weekend game. And he's had problems like this before. Last season in the League Cup, he was playing Saka at places, at the League 2 grounds for 70, 80 minutes. You're just thinking there's an over-reliance on that. He's got the options now. He needs to do it so that those players stay fresh and that the injuries don't rack up like they have been a problem for Arsenal.
Yeah. Sounds like you're making them favourites, though.
I absolutely think Arsenal favourites. Yeah. Even after 5 straight wins for Liverpool, it's not on the back of Liverpool losing. It's on the back of seeing what Liverpool have played and how they've played, that they've had to rely on late winners. And I know I thought that was an incredible game in terms of them beating Arsenal. I thought it's a massive moment for them. But at no stage did I know, Joe, I know we're only in September still.
Yeah.
I know there's a long way to go. Of course there is, but I absolutely have Arsenal as favourites.
Okay, very good. Right, that is us done. Thank you so much. That was brilliant, Gary.
Thank you. I look forward to listening to the podcast on the Ryder Cup.
It was what we were talking about mainly before coming on air. I should let people know. You started off by saying I don't like golf all that much, and then talked at length about it. So it was that kind of a night.
It was unbelievable. That kind of 3 days, that opening ceremony in terms of the players walking out as the sun was rising behind the grandstand, it just made you think about playing in those big moments as a player. I've got so much respect for those golfers because they're not used to playing with noise. We're used to having, massive crowds roaring and giving a stick or whatever, whether or not it's my home team even doing it to me. But to be able to take a putt when someone's roaring in your ear is unbelievable. And for Shane to make that putt, what a moment.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting, because I wasn't sure if the former footballers looking on at the complaints about the abuse would be kind of like, please. But you can see how when they're used to the quiet.
Yeah, because and when you're getting abused, invariably I can then go and have a contact with a centre forward. I can header into the back of him. I can release that. How do you release that when you're concentrating and your hands are shaking for that putt and someone's like abusing you on the literally 10 yards away and I just thought it was. I mean, I'm not mad into golf, but the Ryder Cup is just one hell of an event. It was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it was. Well, like you said, there is a podcast on the way. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon. Cheers, Gary.
Thanks, Joe. Good luck, mate.
Awesome, dude. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks, lads. I'll speak to you soon.
All right. Take